Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another E-commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the table, Andrew, welcome.
Hey, Eric. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, great to see you as well. I'm excited for this. I'm up here in Boston at Klaviyo's headquarters and talking with Andrew. Do you go by the founder? Do you go by the CEO? What do you go by?
I like to just, I don't know, hopefully someone calls himself just an engineer, still just building things. But yeah, I don't know. Founder sounds a little better than CEO to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like.
What do you like to go
I like
by?
founder. I hate CEO. Like someone calls me a CEO, I'm like, that. I mean, for you and your business, what you've built, I think CEO is a fair title. But for me and like my 10 employees, CEO is a little overkill, I feel like.
Fair enough.
So many people know that we've been using Klaviyo since I looked in our first email campaign we sent out was August 11th, 2016. And at the time, you guys had like $1 million, $1.5 million in fundraising. You're very scrappy at the time. I don't know. Do you remember what the business was doing back then?
I think, yeah. So 2015, 2016, man, we couldn't have been more than maybe 20, 30 people. And I bet our revenue was probably around $1 million too. That was probably 2016, I think, was the year we were renting co-working space, and there were like 5 or 6 of us at the beginning of that year, and we would all show up, and it was, like you go to a diner and those booths you have to slide in, slide out of. We literally would all slide in, the 6 of us, and sit there because we thought that was a cool way to work. But we realized after like a few hours, it was a super annoying if anybody ever had to go to the bathroom, like get a glass of water or anything. So that's when I think my co-founder and I were like, okay, we better go find some real office space. So that's where we were back then.
Yeah. You guys went the route of raising money. I guess it was kind of necessary in the early days, or?
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting. Like something I admire about, any retail business, e-commerce business that starts up. I mean, typically there's very little funding, right? It's there's a product that I think should exist in the world. I'm either going to find a way to source it or build it, and then I'm going to get it to people. But it's like, somebody's using their savings, right? Or maybe some friends and family. For us, we were lucky. That's the way we started too. So one of the things actually I'm very passionate about, a lot of technology companies, software companies go this route of, we have an idea, let's immediately go get funded, let's start burning cash, right? We're going to try to hit some revenue milestone. We'll go raise more cash. And that just becomes the self-perpetuating cycle. Hopefully at some point they get public and then at some point they generate profits. But even then it could be 10, 15 years. So we actually took the opposite approach. We said, hey, we were lucky enough. We'd had, jobs at other software companies, banked up a little bit of cash and just tried to build a product on our own. And actually when we probably around that time that we raised our first fundraising round, I made a big business mistake. We didn't actually need the money. And so, we were at the time where, I don't know, people, you probably had this happen, where you've got your bank account, right, for your business. And for us, the way it would work is, over the course of the month, like it would go up, 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 up. And then at the beginning of the month, we had to pay payroll, we had to pay our server costs, and it would drop like really close to zero. And so do this little sawtooth thing. So we decided we'd raise $1 million, but then we went to a VC fund in Boston, and they're like, oh yeah, you guys are totally fundable. Like, we'll write you a check. Side note is, it's a lot easier to raise, obviously, when you've actually proven that you can be a profitable, self-sustaining business. So strongly recommend anybody, like it's harder to do, but it's definitely the way to go if you can. But we said, okay, cool, we're in. We raised that round, and then, they said, okay, well, where do you want us to wire you the money? And we're like, well, here's our bank account, but we're actually not in a rush. And they're like, oh, so is it cool if we just, send you a check in 3 months? And at the time, we're like, well, yeah, it's fine because we're self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize, though, that we should have just waited another 3 months and raised the money then. We could have got a better valuation, all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we weren't the best negotiators back then.
Yeah, and so your business at the time was about 4 years in. So you had been just
Some things take a while to build. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, for you guys, for us, it took us a good solid year or two. Even I tell people all the time to get to it's probably we're making 20 grand a month, right? $250,000 a year. We maybe had 20 or 30 customers, but it took a good solid 24 months to build that much product.
Yeah. I remember those early days. I was a lot more integrated into the software, and I just feel like I would send an email to the Klaviyo team. I forget who it was. Did you guys have a Clayton? Or is that, no, that's Recharge, I think. But we would send a request, and then it was literally like implemented like within a week or a couple days. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, in the early days, the way we used to work when we were first building out our engineering team and our support team, because those were the first two teams we hired for. Yeah, I used to literally spend all morning answering support tickets, right? Because, Eric would have requests, and got to go build that. And then the afternoon was like engineering time. So sometimes it was build the things that are far in the future that you're like, okay, I know we need to go do this. Sometimes somebody would write in, right? They're like, hey, could you add this option? And you're like, well, yeah, can't be that bad. Like, I'll just do it this afternoon. And that would, totally blow people's minds. Like, how on earth did you, that never happens in software, right?
Yeah. Well, from a consumer's perspective, it was always interesting because we moved over from MailChimp, and MailChimp is this beautiful, like, design, like, you can tell, like, they're designer kind of people. And then, like, Klaviyo was very much, like, the engineering alternative. And it was just, like, very, like, you could just see, like, if there's, like, a left brain, right brain, like, MailChimp and Klaviyo was that. And I remember even, like, I was talking to designers, and I don't want to take any credit for it because I know you probably have some great designers, but I'm like, have you thought about like laying it out like this? And I just mocked up something in Photoshop and sent it over to you guys. And then when you rolled out the new launch, it was strikingly similar. It was like, man, that's...
So that launch was, it's totally spot on. It hurts a little bit because I like to think I have some design sensibilities, maybe be less on the visual design side. Yeah, so the original stuff was all, my own handiwork. And yes, as you can tell, very minimalist.
Yeah.
Right. This new, we just relaunched the nav in the last few months. And yeah, that's one of the spots that was kind of a vestige from 10 years ago that finally somebody said, no, Andrew, this is gone, right? We're going to redo this, and it's actually going to look the way it should. So yeah, I don't know. Probably a bunch of inspiration from you, right? Some of those, because I send them around, some of the, like, well, here's mocks that we've had in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful now. You've got the new branding, you got the new website. You guys have all grown up 10 years in. I do want to go back to the whole MailChimp Klaviyo thing because there was some big time drama probably about, 4 years ago, where I guess Shopify changed the way they collected data or handled data or something like that. And MailChimp put their foot in the sand or drew the line in the sand, I guess is what they say. And I'm just curious on your take of that whole situation or what you can or you can't talk about, but just kind of always been interesting to...
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of inside intel. I mean, it's like, I don't know, drama's kind of exciting, kind of not exciting. I think I remember talking, and we're good partners with the Shopify folks and frankly, all the major commerce platforms. And, our stance was always kind of the same, which was like, look, we're going to be really good at, storing data, like pulling it all into one place, making it fast and accessible. And then we're going to be really good at like the messaging and marketing stuff on top. And, I actually talked with Shopify, WooCommerce, the Magento crew, like lots of folks, and said, like, look, that's what we're going to be good at. If that's a core competency of yours, like, have at it, right? But we're going to build that. And then we're also just, I don't know, a big believer in like open source and open platforms. I know some people try to build moats by saying like, hey, it's going to be hard to integrate or inaccessible, hard to get the data out. But our belief was like, I don't know, we'll probably build a better product, right? If we just make it open and let people compete. And then, you actually can build a little bit of competitive advantage if, lots of people integrate, right? Into you, make it easy to do that. So that was just, kind of our stance. Because I think back then, that maybe the ask was, hey, if you have a Shopify website, lots of people may sign up. And so they know who those subscribers are. Hey, we also have our own, subscriber information. Like, can we just sync those two data sources? And from a customer experience or an end consumer experience, right? So if you're an e-commerce brand, I always kind of felt like, well, yeah, I want what happens, whether it's email or text messaging, I want that experience to be the exact same as what you get on the website. And so to do that, you kind of need those two data sets to interoperate. And so for us, it was kind of like, yeah, no problem. So yeah, no inside intel, but like, I don't know. that's just a big believer in, open protocols, right? Obviously with email, open platforms. Yeah, so that's the way we thought about it.
Yeah, and I feel like you said a lot that I really agree with, which, is kind of that openness. And I think it's also like comes from a place of confidence. Like I had a guest on the show, Sean with Ridge Wallet. I don't know if you know him or not.
Yeah.
He's a complete kind of hustler, badass, really competent. And like he'll come over to my office, just open up his spreadsheets of what he's doing on Facebook. And here's my ad rates. Here's what I'm paying. Here's my creative. And he's just showing me everything. He's like, because you're not going to beat me. Like, it's true. There's no way I can beat him because he's just like such a hustler. And I feel like you guys kind of have that same mentality where your organization like is about shipping, right? I guess that's the software term. That
Right, what we call it. Can we ship? We used to be so into shipping. I used to keep this kindergarten calendar on the walls back pre-pandemic. And we take those we take an emoji of a big, freight ship, right? And that's what we'd slap on the wall every day when you got the stuff out the door. Yeah.
How does that change? It seems like it's easy to ship when you have 6 people working around a diner table. You have, thousands of people now?
Yeah, we're up to around 1,500. Yeah. Klaviyo's, as we call ourselves. Yeah.
You have 1,500 people. How do you ship fast now? Is that still possible, or is it?
Yeah. So maybe it's the engineering side of my brain. But when we were, I remember for a long time, when we just started out, the first 2-3 years, it was just myself doing all the engineering. And I remember when we, started inviting other engineers to come join us, right? We hired other folks. My mental model was always like, okay, well, if I can do this, like my goal should be is for everybody else that's a builder on the team, right? Designer, engineer, product person, whatever, right? Even people creating content. How do I make it so that they can go as fast as I could? And I always thought about that 2 things. One is like, how do you give people the autonomy? So like sort of, okay, everybody has a big ambitious project, but they're not so reliant on everybody else. At the end of the day, when you're building any product, right, physical world product, digital product, I mean, you're certainly reliant on other people, right? I mean, we don't run our own servers. We use, a cloud, right, provider to do that. So there's always some interfaces, but how do we set up a project where somebody can run all by themselves? And then 2 is like, how do you give them enough, coaching, mentoring, partnership? So if somebody's trying to build something, if they've never done it before, right? Or they just want a thought partner, they get like fast access to that. So they never get stuck, right? So can't claim that we're perfect at it, but I think it's just that mental model is like, we're now a couple hundred engineers at Klaviyo. And I've always felt the same way. I'm like, oh, so that should mean there should be like 200 projects going on at once. And a lot of people think, oh, it's insane. Like, no. You got to like have teams at 10. And so actually you got to take your whole, like you can't parallel process 200 things. Now you're down to 20. And then even then it's like, well, it's got to take longer. And I don't know, maybe it's just a little bit of like first principles thinking or having lived that experience. I'm like, well, I don't know. It didn't take that long back then. Maybe there's some good reasons why we should go slower. So there's some things now, like we do a lot more testing because, back then it was, we released something to, we released it to Eric, like, all right, you'll send us a nice email and say, hey, please don't break things. Now we send it to 100,000 people, they're all around the world. Like, if we break it for 1% of them, that's 100 unhappy people, right? But yeah, I think it's just that culture of like autonomy, right? Mentorship and just, I don't know, not really, I guess, even if it's not 100% true now, like not wanting to give up on that, we can totally parallel process everything.
Yeah. How do you communicate so that everyone's pointed in the right direction? Because I feel like the key to autonomy is like they're walking the right direction and they do it their own way rather than walking quickly in the opposite direction.
No, totally. And it's certainly an unsolved problem for us. The way maybe the softwareism, right, is kind of this like, we think about a graph of like dependencies. So, if you and I are working on a project, like, hey, what am I relying on you for? And Eric, what are you waiting for me on? That's frankly a really hard problem. So as best we can, like we both try to aim towards general themes, like themes at Klaviyo, whether it's obvious or not from our design work, is usability has always really mattered. But things like security and scalability have always mattered too. I mean, I have this slide or this picture that I trot out every couple of years, which is, I don't remember, I'm pretty old. So like I remember going to an actual bank to open like a checking account, right? When I was like, 10 years old or whatever, put $5 in it. And so I always have this motif of like, we want our software to feel like a vault. Like it's like you could trust it the way you see one of those big, heavy bank door vaults. But so we have themes like that we tell people to kind of guide towards this. And then other than that, it's like, just ask folks to like, hey, can you break the problem down enough that you really understand how you're going to build something? I read this article probably a month or 2 ago that said, hey, teams in general don't focus enough on the what is it they are trying to build or ship or accomplish, like what's the goal? They don't spend enough time on how they're going to get there, like what are the different steps for the work that needs to get done, and they don't spend enough time on who's going to do what. So that's something that we've sort of started, we've used that language a lot around the office, which is like, hey, what are we trying to do? How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? And just spending time talking through that, like usually we can figure out where some of those dependencies are. But yeah, like I said, we're not perfect at it, or we still got a lot of learning to do too.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about is, of course, I got to bring it back to me. What would a show be without talking about myself? Which is, you have a photograph of me down there with a quote where the quote is something like, why focus on 2 channels when you could focus on one and make it the best? And I feel like when I think of Klaviyo, like I do feel like you guys have always had that laser vision. And, how hard it is. You rolled out SMS, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
How hard is it to maintain that vision for what you guys do? Because as a general consumer, you just see it and you're like, oh, all you do is email? Like that's it? How is this such a huge company?
Yeah. It's interesting. Like from the outside in, I think when you're an entrepreneur and you're just starting out, I think about there's really like you're trying to simplify things, right? There's already so much chaos. Like, how do I incorporate a business? Like, how do I hire somebody? I have to figure out marketing, product, sales, like returns, customer service. There's so many things to figure out. You're trying to simplify. So our belief was, for a retail business, hopefully we can simplify it down to more or less like 2 pieces of like technology, right? Infrastructure that you need. And the idea was, one is, okay, well, I need a way to physically sell things to people. So that could be your website, right? If you're not doing wholesale. And the second is like, cool, I need a way to talk to my customers. And our belief is like, yep, you can use advertising, but wouldn't it be better if you could just talk to your customers directly? You don't have to pay for that every time, or you get that you can, land in their inbox. So is that kind of like, okay, what's my commerce software? And then what's my like email software? Obviously, as you grow up, right, you're sort of like, well, there's a lot of data. Like, email becomes kind of your de facto CRM. And then you're like, well, people want to hear from me just on over email, but there's all these other channels. So like, how do I coordinate that? And yeah, that's where we try to, I think of Klaviyo a little bit as this like, it's a little bit like a studio apartment, right? Where, to an entrepreneur, it feels like it's like, yeah, it's got a little bit of everything. But as you grow up and you realize you want this like bigger house, you realize like, oh, shoot, like, Klaviyo is not just studio apartment. Like, it's not just a bed. It's actually got all this other stuff that I want, right? It's got some analytics. It's got the segmentation. It's got a little MLAI. It's got all the channels. So you can kind of branch out into that as you grow. But yeah, sorry, I may have lost the thread here for a second here. What were we talking about?
I don't know.
Oh, multiple channels. Right. Yeah. Well, so like we've always felt that like, look, direct relationships with your customer really matter, right? Mostly because it boils down to control. And most of the entrepreneurs that I know, part of the reason they do it is they want more control over their life, right? They want control over how they spend their time. Maybe it's financial independence. So it's interesting, like when we started Klaviyo, that was kind of just a big theme for me. Klaviyo's mission statement is empowering creators to own their destiny. And I love this idea of like, hey, whatever that destiny is, right? Whether it's financial or it's how you want to spend your time, or there's some impact you want to have in the world, some product you think should exist, that's the goal. And what kind of always stuck out to me is, from having a bunch of side hustles early on, is it is like really hard to build great products, and it's really hard to get those in people's hands and then just talk to them about it. I'm sure you pitched Beard Brand, dozens, hundreds of times, like just honing how you talk about it, right? All that messaging. So we just felt like, look, this is hard enough. If we can make it easy that if you know the product, you know the message, we'll just give you the tools so you can actually get it to the people that you want to reach, and in an authentic way. I'm sure like, take Beard Brand. The pitch is, it's kind of, you could say there's one pitch, but the reality is it's like, well, it probably depends, right? Depending on what you're sporting, like there's probably different products, different ways you should think about it. And so when you go talk to a customer, you probably talk about it differently. How could we replicate that through software? And anyways, our feeling is like, you look at like the marketplaces, the ad networks, whatever. They've all built all these tools to do personalization. A lot of times it's just fully, automated, right? You dump in a couple of variations on content or creative and off it goes. Just felt like, why couldn't you have the same stuff for your own, right? Relationships for your own customers. And yeah, so I don't actually be curious what you think. We think there's like a role for, in retail e-commerce, like you probably do want some distribution through the online marketplaces, through advertising. It's just ultimately, like one of the assets that you're building for your business. It's the products that you have and that, IP, but it's also like your customer base and the fact that trust that you build up. And yeah, we just want to make a way for that, for folks to make that easier for folks to do.
Yeah, Beard Brand, of course, we lean heavily on our own website, beardbrand.com. And you talked about it at Klaviyo 2019 in terms of like owning, just owning your marketplace, and I'm a big fan of that. So you're very much speaking to what I.
And how do you think about that in a world now? Because I think a lot of folks, we talk to a lot of businesses, small and large, they're trying to figure this out. Because I think I haven't met a single, entrepreneur or marketer that is like, yeah, I want to own, right, my customers, right? I want to own that data. But it's hard because it's hard to, you can't do discovery that way, right? People have to know about you. So how do you think about that interplay between, maybe doing discovery via advertising or marketplaces, but also at the end of the day, knowing that you're building towards this asset of more customers who know, your digital properties, right? Your website, your email list, so on and so forth.
Yeah, for us, we've had relationships in Target and Amazon in the past. And, for me, it kind of comes back to our mission. We're very mission oriented, and our core values, freedom, hunger, and trust. And, our tagline, keep on growing. Just kind of all these come back to us. And we do quarterly strategy sessions as founders to kind of talk about what do we want out of it. And, what I really like is, when my head hits the pillow, I fall asleep. And, I don't worry about Amazon shutting us off. I don't worry about, fortunately being on Shopify and the flows we have set up, sales come in while I sleep. So it's very much freedom is a big driver for me, and the freedom of, the mental release as well. I just tweeted about how I don't do debt because I know I could probably grow better by leveraging capital from someone else. But I just love the lack of stress that comes along with not owing anybody or not having any outside partners in there.
Yeah. I think this theme of ownership, we've embedded it in our business and our culture, but I think there's a lot of folks that, they're willing to work to have more control. It's just, how do I get it? So, yeah, anyways, I obviously totally agree with the debt part anyways. I think it's strong advice for everybody out there. But I think there's this, I've seen some brands do some really creative things where they say, hey, look, I'm moving from a world where you used to just think about doing demand gen, right, through advertising or just selling, whether it's wholesale or online marketplaces. And that was kind of the end of it. It was like, oh, yeah, the sales come in and I have my profit margins, and that's kind of the end of the business. To now they're thinking about more, it's like, well, actually, if I can, my products, I'm going to either change the size of my portfolio or I expect customers to come back. And I want that direct relationship with them. And so now actually I'm using that as kind of almost like lead gen. It's interesting for our business, Klaviyo's business, we think all about getting people to just try our products. And then every day we have to build up that trust so that, one of the things I've loved for a long time is we've done, kind of monthly billing like Netflix. Not this, you have to sign a big contract, right, for years in advance. Why? Because it's I want people to vote every month whether or not they think we're still any good. And that's harder. If you screw things up, you're in trouble. But isn't that what every retailer effectively does? Every product experience, to get somebody to come back, they have to choose to. I think there's more retailers now that are looking at less than just a transactional kind of funnel, which is the way I think a lot of us used to thinking. It's more relationship driven, which means, hey, if you buy my products once, I expect you to come back, either because I'll have another product you can buy or my product has some sort of recurring cadence. And therefore, I owe through the product experience, customer service experience, maybe through content I produce, I've got to make that compelling. Yeah. I actually think in the future, I think consumers don't really like deciding they don't like doing discovery. Some of us, shopping is fun some of the time, but most of the time we'd rather just go back to the same brands that we already know the products are high quality, customer service is going to be great, and just stick with them. So we have this mental model of in the future, each of us, our styles, our tastes might be different. But each of us, are going to have the one or two brands we love in a product category, and we're just going to go back to them. And we actually don't want to try to find the next one. That's extra work. And so if a business can take that effort away, that's value add to us. That's, I think, a totally different way of looking at retail than we have for the last, 100 years.
Yeah. I think we end up at the same spot, but from different perspectives in the sense that I agree. Well, our mindset is I don't own any customers. So every single time I have to win them back. And that means good content. That means telling the story. That means, going above and beyond for the customer service. I wanted to segue into you guys raising money from Shopify. You're really kind of tying yourself. I don't know if you're completely tying yourself to the horse or whatever that slogan is, but talk about that partnership and what you guys are doing.
Oh, yeah, sure. So a good friend of mine, we were talking about before we started, built a business on Shopify way back when we were starting Klaviyo in 2012, maybe 2013. Interesting, we actually started Klaviyo as it was a database company, a way to do segmentation, something we're known for. But we were largely actually trying to help segment like other software businesses. So we were kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're a tech business, we need this, and so will other tech businesses. We kind of fell into e-commerce and retail, and he happened to be building his business on top of Shopify. And, they were very early to this movement of like, hey, we're going to have an open platform, APIs for everything, build on top of and around, like build software that will augment, right, make the total package better. So I thought that was great. And it was, it was easy to, we were building a database. So we're like, okay, well, if there's transaction data somewhere, like we want to be able to pull that in. And so anyways, that started out this like partnership. And, as we grew, like, I think it was kind of obvious, like I said, like, if you're just starting out, there's these kind of two focal points, like, two pieces of software you really need to run your business. One is this like commerce stack. And then the other was, we call it like the customer stack, like where I store customer data, how do I do customer messaging, all this kind of stuff. And obviously those work really well together. And it's kind of a long time coming, but we felt like it's like, well, if we could help more, retailers, entrepreneurs, right, founders, e-commerce businesses go faster together. I mean, over the years, we've done a bunch of like product co-development. This was sort of just an easy way to kind of give us both some skin in the game to want to do more of that. And yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things that happened is when we announced that we, had built this partnership as part of that, Shopify invested a little bit in us, it was really validating, not just inside of like retail and commerce, but even in other verticals that Klaviyo is now starting to branch out into, things like, entertainment, media, hospitality, even like restaurants, food service. It was really validating as this idea of like, yeah, there are these two pieces of software that could work really well together. And so we actually had a bunch of folks like, other commerce platforms, other like transactional systems that came to us and said, hey, can we do something similar? And so that's been really fun. And I'm just very appreciative that like, they were, Eric, I'm a big fan of design. Like they were the better designed product from a visual standpoint. I think they actually appreciate our UX, even if it wasn't as pretty, but definitely appreciate kind of the power of what we could do. And yeah, I think now we're excited to take that, to other commerce platforms, but other just like consumer, right, softwares that people use to run consumer businesses in general.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is at my level as a small business founder, I've heard of these at trade shows, but we never implement them, which is like a customer data warehousing. And when I think about, what that is, I would imagine like Klaviyo kind of becomes that for a lot of small businesses. Is that the pathway you guys are going for this, or?
That's right. So like, well, I mean, so I was a science guy in college, so I tend to have these like kind of more abstract ways of describing things. But I often describe Klaviyo as, look, we're trying to be the scalable brain and the scalable voice for a business. Each of us would love to sit down and talk to each of our customers. We'd love to educate them on our products, right? I guess sell them the products, which I guess, I don't know, swipe their credit card for them. And then certainly like, take feedback, right? Hey, what did you like? What did you not like? The challenge with, in retail or really any, consumer-oriented business is you have tons, thousands, millions of customers. It's impossible to do that, right? I mean, I love what you said about like, hey, Klaviyo will send, email to my customers, right? Or messages while I'm sleeping. Exactly. That's the whole point. It's all automation. So one of the things that happens though is that's kind of the voice part. The brain part is interesting. The way we looked at, kind of the newslettery type email services was, if you went into the UI, it kind of looked like a big spreadsheet. There was like, you had, a list of everybody's name, everybody's email address, and maybe their favorite color, and maybe the last time, they bought something. But it was all this like simple facts about people. And, when we started Klaviyo, this kind of analogy, like, I think some of the interesting decisions that we make as humans with each other, they require a little bit more thinking. So, for example, I think in the future, I joke with my wife, is like, we probably go out to eat, go out to dinner, date night, that kind of thing, maybe once a month. And there's always a little bit of discussion about like, okay, so where are we going to go eat? And that's a like kind of a considered decision. It's not just a fact. Oh, my favorite restaurant is X. It's what kind of food have we had recently? And are we celebrating a big event? Like, is it somebody's birthday or an anniversary? There's like a little bit of logic that goes into that. And so you need a little bit more data. In fact, you need this kind of like, almost like we call it an event stream, but this like activity, this history of, well, where have we been? What do we like? What dishes, how would we star them? All this kind of stuff. We wanted basically Klaviyo to be able to replicate that. And we realized, one of the challenges with existing, marketing software was it just was not good at storing that information. So our first goal was, okay, let's be able to store all of that. I think the cool thing that's going to happen, to e-commerce and just marketing software in general, it's going to start to act a little bit more like that brain. You're going to be able to tell it things like, well, figure out what's the best place to eat. I mean, what's the analogy here? I mean, in retail, it's always like, well, what's the next best product for somebody? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a hard problem. Sometimes you've got a good algorithm or a good heuristic for what you want that to be. Sometimes you're like, I don't know. Can somebody make a reasonable suggestion? And I think, when we talk about personalization, that's really what we're getting at. And, I think finally we have kind of the technology to make that possible. Because we've been talking about it for like a couple decades, right? And anybody that's been in marketing that long. But I think over the next couple of years, it's like, oh yeah, it's really going to get that good.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that going to be like your focus going forward is just the brain? Obviously, you've got email and SMS are kind of like the products for that communication platform. Are there other channels that you'll be introducing to be able to communicate with your customer? Or
Yeah. So I mean that, right. If you think that, hey, we want to be the scalable brain and scalable voice. I mean, the brain that's right. It's all about how you store information, right? Because we all forget things eventually. And it's how do you think? How do you make decisions, right? And whether that's somebody logging into Klaviyo and thinking through that, or it's like, well, actually, I want you to come up with some ideas, Klaviyo. It's like, okay, cool. We should be able to help you there. The voice part is fun. From a marketing perspective, yeah, we think about messaging channels, email, text messaging, mobile notifications. If you've got a mobile app, right? No problem. I think then there's some little things of like, well, what about, we think about like the kind of digital like properties, right? You think of like a plot of land that you have. Well, everybody has a website. Okay, great. Well, why is it that personalization kind of stops, when you maybe get an email from somebody, you click through that, like, why shouldn't it follow you into the store? This is kind of our belief around this moving from transactional commerce, where everybody, whether you walk into a Best Buy, right, you visit somebody's website and it all looks the same. We're all used to using, apps now where it's totally personalized to us. I think the same thing should happen to like kind of the shopping experience, right? And you can decide how much personalization you want or don't want. So yeah, we're going to help with those channels as well. And then I think there's some fun things we can do by connecting our database, right? Our brain. Can you connect it to like customer service? Like for instance, if I'm returning a product, great. Well, it should know, hey, has it intuited for my past purchases, maybe what is the correct size or what is my style? And can whoever's helping out with that response, right? Can we help set them up to have a great interaction rather than leaving it to somebody to kind of, we all know, like somebody asks us to place 20 questions the first time you write into support. I think we can make that experience better. So we think about all those different touch points, whether they're completely automated or they're self-serve, we drive them ourselves, or, I'm actually talking to somebody. Can we make all of those experiences feel like you're talking to somebody that knows you and knows everything about you, at least the information that you've shared with somebody?
Yeah. Not to the point where it's kind of creepy.
Right. One of the things we founded Klaviyo on was the way we decided we're going to use data is this idea of, we're trying to help you scale yourself, you as a founder, as a creator. We want to say, like, look, if you and I and Eric are having, we're having a conversation, if you remember something from the last time we met and say like, hey, I remember you, like, I don't know, I remember you got a kid, like, how's he or she doing, right? That's like totally fair game. If you're like snooping around in, my backpack, right? Or you're talking to somebody that I didn't know you knew, right? That starts to creep us out a little bit. And there's obviously a spectrum there. We think, basically people just want to be treated like people. So businesses should play by the same norms. I think that's part of the reason why you see a little bit of the backlash you see about like, privacy and this move away from like, okay, people having my data and I didn't even know it. We like to think it's like in the future, like, I don't know, maybe you don't need as much of that because you've actually already got a lot of interesting information.
Yeah. Well, Klaviyo is, we've been a longtime user since 2016. It's a product I highly recommend. And thank you. I know you're building quite an impressive business, so I appreciate you taking the time out this afternoon. Where can people support Klaviyo, buy Klaviyo, or reach out to you or follow you on Twitter or whatever if you do any of that jazz?
Yeah, cool. So obviously, Klaviyo.com, great place to get started. Whether you're just starting out your business, we think the best time to start an email list or an SMS list is before you even launch. So we've got lots of great guides on how to do that. Or if you're scaling up, we've got stuff for you there too. And then me personally, like, I don't know, I don't do a lot of social media. Obviously, you can find me, Andrew at Klaviyo.com with any feedback, especially if you're a Klaviyo user. And then, I'm A Bialecki on Twitter. I don't know. Sometimes I've got a hot take or two. But yeah.
Yeah, no salespeople hitting you up. I'm sure you get plenty of those.
Tons of that. Yeah.
All right, guys, this has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and got a couple of nuggets as well. Cheers. Keep on growing.